Oh, baby, we got a good one for you today. Welcome back to the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Flex Shane. I got today I kind of call you the true best ball degenerates. Chris, pretty much you follow your Twitter or X, and you're always going to see your latest underdog best ball draft. We got Chris Felicetta. He is a DFS Army contributor. Chris, it's been a hot minute since you've been on the show. Welcome back, brother.
Thanks, man. It's always a pleasure to be here. Yeah, if you that's all you're gonna get from me on Twitter. No politics, nothing. Just underdog cardio club drafts and what I'm doing in the latest best ball street. So I'm happy to be here and talk to you about it.
Sweet, man. Yeah, we got Brandon in the chat talking about it's been a long time. It has been way too damn long. So, Chris, I know that you've got a few articles up on the DFS Army website, of course, dfsarmy.com. Your latest one was talking about Justin Jefferson in best ball, but are you going to be putting content out all summer with best ball?
Yeah. I'm just gonna kind of come and go when I have like a good idea that I think something that's relevant and different than what else I'm seeing out there. That article you spoke about is it goes back to a conversation we had last year around this time where we were talking about if you wanted to basically fade Chase and Jefferson, you could have a 25% over the field stake on CMC. And if someone had actually done that, had the balls to do that, that would be a huge advantage last year because obviously Jefferson got hurt, Chase was banged up, and Burrow gets hurt. So I thought, what can I do to kind of stand out and be a little bit different and find some edge against like these other sharp best ball players? And I haven't seen anything where anyone's really taking a hard stance on a first round player, like trying to really get overweight. And there's obviously some, there's the downside is you're going to have to fade the other people around them. But like I did it, I got 60% Justin Jefferson in a pre-draft contest. And I'm doing it right now with Bijan, where like it's at the 20 max poodle that they have. I'm like, I'm just going to take Bijan wherever my first round pick is, regardless. And right now I'm 5 drafts in, I'm 5 for 5 with Bijan teams. So let's say I get 15 out of 20 teams Bijan. No one is going to have more Bijan than me in this tournament. And if he lives up to basically just does what he's projected to do, he's going to be a high advance rate player. And then I'm going to have more combinations of Bijan in that tournament than anybody. No one's going to have more Bijan than me. And also, I think the added benefit of that is it's giving you unique builds because everyone who's taking him at 7 or 8 where he's going, you're getting a whole different set of players with him when you're taking him at 1 or 2. And, you're giving up a little bit of projection, but it's not much. Like I looked at it, I went back and I think you sent me like our projections. And we have I think we have Jefferson maybe projected like a half a point over the course of the full season, less than Chase. That's basically nothing. But if you're taking a stance on like I did in the preseason with Jefferson, and you're getting totally different lineups than everybody else just to give up a half a point over a full season of projection, I think it's an interesting strategy to try in like a time box contest. So that's what that article is about. If you want to like hear my reasoning, you could read that and kind of get deeper into it.
So it's more so an approach for a smaller contest, like Best Ball Mania 5, for example. Like, are you taking like a really strong stand on a specific player in a specific round for that tournament?
Not. I mean, I'm taking some big late round stands. Like last year, I had a huge stand on Laporta, which was obviously great. I just thought that he was I loved his prospect profile. And then weird, this may sound stupid, but I happened to be watching the combine when the tight ends were working out. I'm like, this guy is just fluid. Like, I just loved the way he moved. I thought this dude is going to be a stud. And then when he went to Detroit, I thought it was like the perfect landing spot. So I got way overweight Laporta. And then when I got to the BBM playoffs, like of my 22, I think it was like 22, 23 teams that advanced, half of them had Laporta. So like, after like the first, I think they were the Thursday night game. So like he scored 3 touchdowns in week 15 on that Thursday night game. And I'm looking at those 10 teams like I'm winning the million. But now with the thing I'm doing with like Jefferson and Bijan is I want to have as many combinations because only 3 of those teams advanced. So it's like I want to have as many unique combinations with the guys that I'm taking a big stand on. So I think it's a little risky. I think it makes sense. I don't have a particular like strong like Jefferson should be the number one where I would do it in BBM in like a 150 set tournament. I think it probably plays out better just because you're getting more numbers. Like if you had the bankroll or the time to do it in a puppy. Like I can't get 150 of these puppies. Like I can't
Yeah.
get them down. So, but I think that would be like maybe the best place to do it. Like if you wanted to get, like I got 60% Jefferson. So if you had 90 Justin Jefferson teams in one puppy tournament, and then Justin Jefferson does what we know Justin Jefferson is capable of doing,
Mm-hmm.
no one is going to be better positioned to take advantage of that than you. So that's the way I'm looking at it with that. But with Best Ball Mania, I'm not willing to fade CMC, fade CD, fade Tyree, fade Chase, fade Brees just to do that.
Any one of those players in round one can pretty much, if you just decide to fade them, they could burn you. Like they could be the best player in fantasy that particular year. So that's why you have to be a little more careful with these larger scale tournaments. But let's get into some of the more specific player takes here, Chris. Let's go talk about let's get into some of these questions.
He's my best friend. He's my pal. He's my homeboy, my rotten soldier. He's my sweet cheese, my good time boy.
All right, brother. So one of the things we're starting to talk about here is why we play fantasy football. And ultimately, I play fantasy football. I don't know about you, Chris, but it ultimately our goal is to win, right? But a close second to that is just the emotions that go into fantasy football. And typically it's more so the tilting emotions, right? It's those super highs and those super lows. But do you have an example of a situation in fantasy football that just put you on absolute tilt?
I have, yeah. It kind of builds off of what I was just talking about. Last year, week 16 was probably the biggest tilt of my fantasy career because I had a better than average advance rate. I had a great like week 15 because I was heavy on Laporta, and I had a lot of good teams going in the semis. And then basically all of them other than two got dusted off by Amari Cooper. And it was the 50-point Amari Cooper burger. And I was also going up against Amari Cooper in like a home league that I've been in for 20 years, like relatively high stakes. I think like a 350 buy-in or something. And this team was just loaded. It was like a Josh Allen like CMC team that also had like Taylor and Saquon. It was loaded, like just dominated the entire season and just got dusted off by the Amari Cooper 50-point game. So like I had no Amari Cooper. I advanced basically, I think, two teams that happen to have Pickens on him, who also had a very good week in best ball to the finals. But like, it could have been a really nice year. It's crazy how one game like that from one random player can basically make or break your season. But I've kind of tried to think about this year as building lineups and building portfolios through different contests to try to protect myself against that or take advantage of that, like super spike week plays.
Yeah, it's such a it's such a low probability thing of happening, right? Like first of all, it has to happen in one of those later weeks where it's an advancement week. And then second, these are players like Amari Cooper, he's good for a 50-pointer every 3-4 years, right? I remember actually, I think it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. And you might recall he had like a super slow start to the season. He wasn't doing squat. So I remember actually traded for him with just one of my my home leagues. And for whatever reason, I think for bye weeks, I had to throw him in my lineup. And that's when he put up the 50 points. Now, I don't think he did squat for the rest of the season. Like, that was one of his down seasons. But, man, he has that just massive upside potential. Are you in on Cleveland at all this year? Like, do you trust Deshaun?
I don't think anybody trusts Deshaun, but I think where he's going, he goes so late.
He's free.
Like, yeah, it's like I'm actually getting a lot of him. Like, and it's a gross click for numerous reasons, but I do think that Stefanski's a good offensive mind. And you like look what they did with Flacco at the helm. And now if you read everybody's healthy, everybody's in the best shape of their life this time of year. But like if you read all the reports that he's off, like further removed from the shoulder surgery, he's looking good, it's make or break year, all that type of stuff. And I like Judy as an addition there as the number 2. So yeah, I'm definitely getting some Cleveland. It's not like my focus, but I have no problem getting Deshaun as like the third quarterback in like a 3 QB build, or sometimes if like I take an Allen or somebody, an Allen, a Hurts, like someone like that, like as the second quarterback in a 2 QB build, because he goes so late. And we've obviously seen the upside. He's still not old. What is he, maybe
Yeah.
like 28, 27 in that range? Like,
Yeah, he's definitely in that range.
yeah, so I don't think he's like washed. He's looked at the past couple of years, but I think you could kind of look at the circumstances and be like, if he's ever going to turn it around, like this is the year. Like I'm definitely going to have some exposure, but he's not like my focus. It's not like I'm going into a draft looking to stack Cleveland, but when it happens, I'm totally cool with it.
Yeah, he's 28.7 running his data a few weeks ago. So yeah, he'll probably still be 28 when the season plays out here, but that's still young for a quarterback. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, you look at his price and he's just so dirt cheap. He's going as the quarterback 21 at pick 163. I mean, at that point, you really can't go wrong. And if you do go and get like an Amari Cooper, David Njoku is one of these players that I'm pretty comfortable taking late. Like if I decide to fade the tight end, or he's like a perfect tight end too. If you do decide to get a higher end tight end, I think that's pretty solid. But I mean, I think it would be a fool's errand to basically say, yeah, let's put all our chips in. Let's go Deshaun. One of my, at the time, it felt like a great trade, Chris, but last year in a draft, and I was actually relatively high on CJ Stroud, but I was in a league and I actually won this league in Dynasty, but I traded away CJ Stroud to get Deshaun Watson. This was obviously before started. This was before CJ Stroud was CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
Somehow
it was one of the ones nobody knew.
It's so painful, man. And now it's like, okay, Deshaun's basically worth nothing, and I was worth like 4 first-round picks. But
yeah,
I digress, man. I digress. Okay, let's get into it. So I think one of the things that we really need to wrap our heads around when it comes to best ball is you have to look back and see what worked in the past in terms of building a team. But you have to also understand that because of the things we just talked about, Chris, about the certain randomness, like how can you bank on Sam Laporta getting 3 touchdowns in a particular week, Amari Cooper putting up a 50-point monster during the best ball playoffs? But are there any major differences this season in best ball drafts that you've noticed relative to other seasons and how it's evolved and changed?
I think we were just talking a little bit about this before we got on. The wide receiver thirst, especially on Underdog, is at all-time levels. And it's especially this particular time of year because as like it gets closer to the season tipping off in like August, you'll see a lot more casuals coming in who aren't listening to 16 podcasts a week, who aren't like watching streams where everybody's a 0 RB, bro. So right now, like the wide receivers it's just super pushed up, and you can just get caught behind where like you are stuck at wide receiver, and like all of a sudden your number 2 or 3 is Jerry Jeudy, who I talked about liking a little bit, but I like him a lot more if he's my 5th or 6th receiver. Like I had talked to one of my buddies last night that had dinner with us, is a big fantasy football player, but is only just starting to dabble in best ball, and he got on and did a couple best ball mania slows, and he was like, what is with this with wide receivers? Like people like that's all anybody wants to take, and like he's not really listening to that many podcasts and stuff. And I'm like, no, dude, it's serious. It's a very hungry wide receiver market out there. But I think one thing I've noticed, especially in the last week or two, because of that, the elite QBs are falling a little bit. Like I've gotten drafts where I've gotten like a handful of Josh Allen in the 4th round, and I think you're really big on AR, right? Like I've seen AR pushed back to the 6th round. So like I don't think it's generally optimal to do like the double elite QB build. But when you're getting guys like you could do Mahomes or Lamar in the 4th, and then like AR in the 6th, like I think that gives you a really unique setup come the playoff time. And those guys, if they do what we expect them to do, they're going to get to the playoffs. They're going to get you through.
Yeah, so Anthony Richardson's ADP right now is 57, which is essentially the back half of round 5, right? So yeah, so like right around that 5-6 turn. So
yeah,
and if you think about that from a construction standpoint, like if you want to go and get a Michael Pittman, he's going what, round 3, generally speaking?
Yeah. I think so. I could look at the Underdog ADP, but I think it's right around there. And that's why I like one of my biggest
32.
stances is not even like a player. Like I have a ton of Lamar, and it's just because so many times I'm sitting in the fourth round. I'm like, I don't really like any of these guys. Like I think Lamar is just the best player on the board. Why not just take him? And I think there's enough value late at this point where you can build at the the running back and wide receiver positions and just lock in that QB1 in the fourth round. So that's why I'm getting a lot of Lamar, and I'm starting to get more Josh Allen and some Mahomes and a little bit of Hurts too.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any other players that are flirting into that high end tier? Like you can, close your eyes, you can see Anthony Richardson, you can see a CJ Stroud, these types of players being the overall quarterback one in any given season, right? Like, are you more comfortable fading like the high end elite guys like the Lamars, like to Jalen Hurts, because we have that potential with those other players? Or you really say, okay, if I'm going to spend up on a quarterback, I really do want one of these top 4 or 5 guys?
No, I kind of put Stroud and AR in that group. Like AR was my QB, my highest owned QB by a lot last year, which kind of I still had like a decent advance rate. I think it was around like 20%, but I think I owned 25% AR. So it was like I'm trying to think like what it could have been, but I think we saw, I think I've seen you say, he was the number 1 fantasy point producer and like dropbacks per dropback. But I mean, obviously it's a very small sample size, but he showed at a super young age what he's capable of. So I have no problem including him in that group. And I think Houston has, if you look at their week 15, 16, 17 matchups, like they could all be shootouts. Like I love, and we know what Stroud is now. And now he adds, even if you think he's a little long in the tooth, adding Steph Diggs to that mix, like Stroud could throw for 5,000 yards. Would you be shocked? And like, if you look at his playoff matchups, I know he has Baltimore, and I believe he plays Miami and KC, I want to say, as well off the top of my head. I have to look it up. But I know it's week 17 versus Baltimore. That game could obviously go crazy. And I think week 15, 16, I want to say he plays Miami and KC. But it's, I think they could be the absolute like nuts if Houston just goes on a 3-game run there. So I have no problem including him with the top guys.
Oh yeah, you're right. They've got Dolphins, Texans, and Ravens. Excuse me, Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens.
Yeah.
So what the season? That's pretty.
That is. Yeah. Those are how those games are going to be. Like if you had to predict what I'm sure you could find them out there online, what the totals of those, like the look ahead totals, like those games all have potential to go completely nuclear,
Well, and what's good is that 2 out of those 3 games are at home in Houston, in the dome, which is fantastic. They do have that one game against the Chiefs, which if the weather's not great, it could be a letdown, right? It could be one of those ones where people are drafting to get that matchup and then ultimately are disappointed. But do you have a particular wide receiver that you're leaning towards on the Texans? Like, is it Stephon Diggs? Is it like, or is it just whoever falls?
You know what? I'm good with, I kind of have them in the order they're drafted, but I don't think it's that wide of a gap. Like I think, because Nico, I think is the one who plays that X that's going to be out there no matter what, like on the field. Like I think he does something very different than what Diggs and Tank do. But I have no problem taking Diggs. I'm getting Diggs, and I have no problem taking Tank in the 4th. I think Tank's one of the better 4th round picks. So I will stack Stroud with any of those 3, no problem. Like I don't have a strong lean on it. Like I favor him in ADP, but not strong. It's not like a strong lean where I'm fading one of them and like going super heavy on one of the others.
Yeah. It's okay. So for the people, the ADPs right now. So Nico Collins is the first wide receiver off the board at wide receiver 14. So he's going at pick 28. Stephon Diggs is going at 27, and Tank Dell is going at 38. And I think ultimately any one of those players could come out at the end of the season. People are obviously a little bit worried about Nico Collins because late breakout and also only really produced after Tank Dell got hurt. The other thing too is that Stephon Diggs is a target owner, right? Like he's going to demand targets in that offense. And, sometimes he can be pretty vocal, right? I think that Josh Allen is the first to tell you that if he's not getting the ball, or even if he doesn't think he's getting the ball enough, even if he's leading the target share on his team in any particular week. Like he's still going to be vocal about that. So that's going to be interesting. What about Joe Mixon though? Like, are you just wanting to go piece of the Texans offense?
I haven't gotten much Mixon, and maybe that's elite because I hear a lot of smart people are in on Mixon, and he's gonna be the bell cow as long as he's healthy in that offense.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't have enough yet, but I will get some. I'm not like consciously avoiding Mixon, but it's weird. He's a guy that like I haven't got much of yet, but I have no problem with taking him because for the same reason I just think their playoff schedule is beautiful, and I think he's clearly the lead guy. Like they don't trust Pierce, Damian Pierce. They proved that last year. And what they have like Jawar Johnson or something. Jackson is like the last kind of the guy they drafted in like the 5th round or something like that. So I don't know. Mixon's clearly going to get every opportunity to be the lead. So I don't have a lot of him yet, but I'm going to look to get some to kind of balance that out.
What I find challenging to pull the trigger on a player like a Joe Mixon is because the guys that he's going around are like the aforementioned Anthony Richardson, right? So would you rather take a gamble on a player like Mixon where his numbers are dropping, right? And his per touch numbers are dropping, his efficiency is dropping, but then he is transplanted into this amazing offense. Can he fall into the end zone a few times? But ultimately, like Joe Mixon's not going to be a player, in my opinion, that's going to win you a tournament. Whereas
No,
Anthony
he's
Richardson
not.
is.
Exactly. So, that I think that the opportunity cost is probably why I haven't taken a lot of Joe Mixon because, like, and even the tight ends that are going around there too. Like, I think like Pitts kind of goes in that range. Like, you got kind of the Mark Andrews, Kincaid guys. Like, I think this is a big year for elite tight end. Like, I'm definitely at least with the field on all the elite tight ends with. One notable exception being Kelsey. I'm kind of fading Kelsey this year, which is a dangerous thing to do, but I just think they're going to take their foot off the gas with him. So I think like late in the season, they're going to save him for the playoffs. They kind of showed it last year. He was a different player, like once the playoffs, because they know they don't need him to get there. They need him to win it. So I think, what is he, 35? He's going to be this season. Like I'm happy to be underweight Kelsey this year, which is like a dangerous thing to say, but I just think that Arizona is going to lean much more on a younger McBride. I think I'm fine. It's kind of crazy. I heard yesterday on the show that Kyle Pitts is still only 23 years old. He's younger than half the first round rookies coming in right now. I'm willing to drink that Kool-Aid for one more year with a better offensive coordinator and quarterback in there, and apparently him being healthy to try to get my shares there and get the advantage at tight end there.
Yeah, him and Kyle Pitt, or him and Sam Laporta are both only 23 years old, which is insane.
Yeah,
Travis Kelce is 34 right now. He'll probably be 35 come playoff time. But yeah, that's pretty wild. Well, okay, let's talk about then a round that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around because the value seems pretty flat. And that's round 2 of the drafts. And like specifically, I'm looking at a lot of these now third-year wide receivers. You've got players like Garrett Wilson. He's going right around the turn at pick ADP 11. Drake London is at ADP 14, and then Chris Olave is at ADP 17. Now, I would have these guys ranked in that order, but it's not like one of these things where this player, like when Devontae Adams has gone, like he's fallen because of the age into round 2. To me, that's a player that's a snap call. Okay, this is a great player that I'm comfortable building around, but like, how comfortable are you pushing the button on a player like a Chris Olave, knowing that he might not have that elite upside, or maybe that's why he's going around 2?
I'm fine with Olave. Like you said, I think that's a very flat tier, like round 2. Like you got both San Francisco guys, you got Nico Collins. I think Olave, because they don't have like a star number 2 there. Like you look at Ricky, I can't even say his name. Shaheed.
Yeah.
He's like a kind of big play boom bust guy. They got the tight end Johnson who can do a little bit, but I'm fine with Olave. Like I'm getting my shares of him, but I don't have a big stance, so I'm kind of spreading it out. And the thing that I've kind of done a little bit in the back half of that round too,
Yep.
I'm willing to roll the dice on A-Chan because Chain, I forget how
Yep.
it's properly said, but
A-Chan, yeah.
just because that's so flat, like you could get like, you know, the Mike Evans, one of the top 2 San Francisco guys, like it's so flat there that a receiver is going to come back to me in early round 3. So I like, whereas if you miss out on Achan, there's not another running back in that range that I'm particularly interested in. So it's like, I'll grab Achan just knowing that, okay, this is risky, this is boom bust, but we know he's capable of giving you that 40, 50 point week that can single-handedly advance you around. Whereas if I don't have a strong preference between Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave, Debo, Mike Evans, like I'll take whoever's there for me in the 3rd and just lock down Achan at like pick 210 or whatever, you know?
Are you in on Brandon Ayuk this year?
I kind of have like a width of field stance. Like I'm getting my shares, but like I'm not like targeting him, but I'm definitely not avoiding him. Like San Francisco is so tough because it's like there's so many chefs in that kitchen, and you know they're all like excellent football players. You know Debo is capable of giving you a monster week. You know Ayuk's capable of giving you a monster week, but they're inconsistent. And same with like Kittle. I think Kittle. I kind of like Kittle better because he's, you know, he goes late. He goes like 6th round. Like, and we've seen it. I looking at his stats today. He had 1,000 yards last year, I think, which seems surprising because it didn't seem like he had that good of a season. But you know that he can pop off like when the game plan, you know, calls for it. He can pop off and give you as good a tight end week as anybody. And if he does it in week 15 or week 16, like, or God forbid you're in the finals and he does it for you, like he can make you all the money. So I just want, like, I think tight ends can really separate. Like the elite tight ends are what kind of advances you. We've seen Kittle do it. I think 2 years, like when Pat Carrane won like Best Ball Mania, there was the year that Mark Andrews, you needed him to advance. I think that was like the year, like maybe Best Ball Mania 2, where like Chess Liam won it. And then last year, like he was really tough getting out of that week 15 if you didn't have Laporta. Like, because he was a very high advance rate player, because he was the tight end 1 who was drafted in like the last 3 or 4 rounds of drafts, and then he drops 3 TDs in week 15. So I'm like Kittle's kind of the last of that tier. I think like people will argue like who, you know, like if you want to include like Njoku or Bowers in that, but like I think you need a tight end that's going to give you that ceiling. Like if you're because I don't love the late round tight ends like I did last year. Like I'm not as confident in guys. Like there's not a Laporta out there.
Well, we're going to talk about your tight end exposure a little bit later, and there is one rookie tight end.
There's the sneaky one that everybody wants to be this year's Laporta, but I'm drinking that Kool-Aid a little bit. But he's kind of the only one that I even feel like relatively comfortable in that position. Yeah,
that's what we call him as a teaser. We got to make sure we talk about it later. Okay, so just to kind of put a bow here on this George Kittle talk. So he did lead the league last year for tight ends in terms of receiving yards. He had 1,020, and he was tied for second with 6 touchdowns. Of course, Sam Laporta put up 10, which really that was a determining factor, right, for making Sam Laporta just such a monster, was that touchdown upside. But we also know that touchdowns can be somewhat fluky. So again, they're in on Sam Laporta, and so am I. But if you close your eyes and again just picture like what's another tight end that could walk away with 8 to 10 touchdowns in a season, George Kittle's definitely there, and
you're getting a 3 or 4 round discount off Laporta. Like I love Laporta. He was the only reason I had a decent best ball season last year, essentially. But why should he be 3 full rounds ahead of Kittle? That seems like a little bit too big of a gap there. So I'll get some Laporta. I think I'm like right around maybe like 8% with the field on Laporta. But like I think McBride's a better pick at cost. I think Mark Andrews is a better pick at cost. I think Kittle and Pitts are better picks at cost. And I think you could even push it to the Bowers and Njoku range if you want.
Well, okay, so Kyle Pitts is going ahead of George Kittle, and just straight up, who would you rather have? I'd rather have George Kittle because he's done it, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the safer pick. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. I love that Atlanta Washington game for week
Yes.
17, and I
Yep.
want as many pieces of that. So I'm fine. Like I don't have a problem with taking Pitts over Kittle, but it's definitely much more speculative. Like it's a lot safer of a pick to take Kittle. We've seen
Yep.
him be. We've never really seen it. I think what does Kyle Pitts have 3 touchdowns in his career? I think maybe or something like that, or like it's something. It's an astonishingly small number over 3 seasons. Maybe it's like 6. I think he had like 3 total in his first 2 years or something. It's a really small number though.
But like you said, he's still very young. He's still 23.
23 years old.
So what if he was just entering the league this year, along with the other rookie tight ends? It would just be like, okay, this guy's perfect. Let's go. Let's go. We'd be in on him, right? But and Grime Aries, just we're gonna save that one for later. What is your approach on stacking? Like, are you a must stack guy? Are you willing to reach to make those stacks happen? Or reach, I find that a lot of the times the ADPs are kind of lining up just because so many people are stacking.
Yeah, ADP naturally forms towards stacks. It depends. I'm not gonna. I'm definitely gonna try to stack. I think that's obvious. But especially with the just the pocket passers. Like if I don't necessarily care that I have Kirk, that if I do or don't have Kirk Cousins in a Drake London or a Kyle Pitts team.
Yeah.
Like if I don't need Aaron Rodgers because I have Garrett Wilson, like I'd like to have Goff with like Amon-Ra and Laporta, but if I don't, that's no big deal. Especially like I'd much rather have like AR or Jaden Daniels backstacked with like AD Mitchell or even like Luke McCaffrey or a tight end we were going to tease to talk about later, then like force a Kirk Cousins in there or force it. Like I don't need Matt Stafford if I have Puka. Like I'm not forcing those stacks, especially I'm not going to reach for them. If they're there and you get them at value, which a lot of times you will, because like let's say this is kind of just like a thing when you draft a lot, you'll notice like you can push a pocket passer. Like if you're the Chase owner and God forbid you have Chase and Higgins, Burrows might fall 20 picks of ADP because no one wants him on stat. Like happens with Tua, it happens with Dak, especially happens with Dak a lot because no other receiving target of him. Like Ferguson goes right around the same area, but like it's CD and then nobody else. So if you're in a draft with a lot of red badges on underdog that don't want to take quarterbacks on stack, and you're the CD owner, you can push Dak and he might fall 15 picks of ADP. So I'm definitely not forcing stacks, especially with pocket passers. I'll push them and see if I can get them, but I'm not going to really make it a priority to jump ADP to get them.
Isn't it crazy how much people hate Dak?
Yeah, I guess they didn't add anything, but like I think Dak is a value. I think Dak is definitely a value. So
he had 590 pass attempts last year, which I believe was first in the league. Second behind Jared Goff. Maybe third. Okay, let's call it top of the league, right? Top 2 or 3 in the league, and he's got a consolidated target share. It's going to be Jake Ferguson. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb. If you can get both of those guys, like if I get CeeDee Lamb in round 1, I'm going to prioritize getting a player like a Dak Prescott.
And you don't have to reach for him. Like a lot of times, like you can make that stack every time you get CD. Like I think the most you'll have to reach for him is like you pick him and like say his ADP. I could be a little off on this, but say his ADP is like 74, like 76, and you take him at 74 right on whatever turn that is, like you're going to get him. You can make that unless there's just some like rogue guy that's taking them like 10, 12 picks ahead of ADP, which will occasionally happen in enough drafts. But like 9 out of 10 drafts, if you want Dak with your CD pick, you could get him. It's not hard. It's an easy stack to make.
Yeah, his ADP is 91, which
as
long as he can fall to you at the back end of round 8, which is realistic. Like it's more often than not you're probably going to make that stack happen.
Say. Like I think almost every time that I've taken CD, I've been able to get that. Like it's one of those, unless somebody really jumps the shark on it, but no one else has a Dallas pass catcher at that point, so nobody's really super incentivized to do it. So I think it's an easy stack to make.
So we talked about CD. We've talked about a few of the other wide receivers in round one, but are you willing to pivot and take a stab at the running back position in round one, be it the CMC, the Bijan Robinson, who we already talked about? Like, are you comfortable making that pick?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a bad running back pick in round one right now.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, CMC is what he is. And I was talking to my buddy about this last night. He, who only does a couple of drafts, had the number one and took CD. And I'm like, I had no problem with that. Like, if you want to go with CD and like that be your number one, I think that's a completely reasonable take. But as someone like me who's doing a ton of these drafts, like, I'm going to get my CMC shares when I get number one, because if I don't, I'm going to be a full fade on CMC, which I don't want to be. Like, I'm getting CD every time I have the second pick. I'm getting CD very occasionally when I have the third pick. So I'm going to have at least, the field, if not a little bit over on CD without taking that one. But I will take CMC every time I have the one pick, just because I want that, 8%. If he has a season like he did last year, if he has the game you need in any one of the playoff weeks, I don't want to be a full fade on it. And I think Bijan, I think the market, the ADP is pretty much sharp at running back early in the draft. Like, I love Bijan, I love Brees, and I think Gibbs is deservedly a few picks back from them, because Montgomery's more of a problem than anybody else has in their backfield. But I think he's an explosive talent. And if anything, if like Montgomery, comes, he's a back who's been around. He's been it's probably like, I guess, his sixth year or something like that. Like, if he like hurts a hamstring or something, like Gibbs is right there with the other three as like an absolute crusher. So I have no problem going RB1. But then I'm probably almost definitely not taking an RB in round two, not taking an RB in round three, because you will fall behind on receiver if you try to get too cute and take too many running backs early.
I find Saquon's falling too far. His ADP is now 17. Do you have a strong take on Saquon?
That's a tough one for me, because I love I'm a Giant fan. I love Saquon the player. I don't begrudge him going to Philly for the additional money, and I think he's still very good. But I'm scared of the tush push. And one, they don't throw to the running back. Hurts just doesn't check down. That's not what he does. And he's going to steal a significant amount of touchdowns. So I do think Saquon will be better with that. He's going from arguably the worst offensive line in football to arguably the best and a much better offense. So I'm getting some Saquon when he falls, and he will fall a little bit into the second half of the second round, because people have the same concerns that I do, but I haven't prioritized. So
I think it's kind of interesting. Like, you got Kellen Moore now, who's the OC, and Jalen Hurts said in OTAs that their playbook is like 95% different or some wacky thing. Probably that's a hyperbole, but they've apparently changed up their playbook, and it kind of makes sense when you look at how they finished out the end of last season. It wasn't impressive. And so then the question is going to become, does that mean they try to use Saquon more on a goal line and get away from the tush push? I mean, is there really going to be that many opportunities where they're on the 1 or the 2 yard line? I mean, maybe there is going to be, but it just seems like that on itself is going to be extremely fluky, right? Just how things play out.
And we don't know, like, if this new center, I forget the kid's name that's taking over for Kelsey, if he's going to be as good at it as Kelsey. Like, that's entirely a possibility, that he's just not as good at it as Jason Kelsey was, and they go away from it a bit with an elite talent like Saquon in the backfield. So I don't know. I have no problem taking Saquon. I'm getting some shares, but like, I think the price is fair, and I think he's going to probably sit in that like mid second round range. So like in builds where I have, wide receiver in the first round, I have no problem taking him. But in the builds where I go running back, I'm not taking Saquon. Like, if I have Brees or, Brees, Bijan, you're not going to get him with CMC. But if I have Brees, Bijan, or Gibbs, I'm probably not taking Saquon round two.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and it just goes back to what your previous comment was. If you do that, you're just so far behind on the wide receiver position that you're pretty much playing catch up the entire draft, which you want to be in a position where you can take the best player available and not force to take a player to balance out a roster. So that's certainly
exactly
good. So I know we've already kind of touched on the show, but do you have a strong stance on these onesie positions? So the tight end position, the quarterback position. Are you, generally speaking, if one of the elite guys falls to you, you're going to take them, or are you going to wait? Just yeah, do you have a strong take one way or another?
I want an elite tight end this year, and as I want to get one of those top. I want, if Laporta, I'm not getting as much of because of where he goes, but McBride, Andrews, Kittle, Pitts. I want a guy that could give me, that I could realistically think has a shot to give me 25 points in week 15 or 16 and get me to the finals. And I think I like taking a second, you know, tight end that has some decent upside too, because then now you've given yourself an extra roster spot. If you're only playing if you only have rostering, this is especially true on Underdog where it's 18 rounds as opposed to DraftKings where it's 20. Like, if you're only taking 2 tight ends, that gives you an extra stab at trying to find this year's Puka or this year's Kyron Williams or this year's Tank Dell. Like, because we know that's an inexact science. If any of us knew how to find that guy in the 18th round or the 17th round, we'd all be millionaires. But like, if so, give me an extra stab at that. And by taking only 2 tight ends, by taking only 2 QBs, you're getting an extra stab at that. So I am like kind of trying to, if at all possible, like go at least one elite QB or at least one elite tight end this year. Because I don't think the prices are restrictive on them, with the kind of Laporta being the only like noticeable exception. Like none of the QBs, like Allen's QB1, and now you can kind of get him in the 4th round occasionally, like late 3rd. Like I've taken him 2 or 3 times in the 4th this week. So like I don't think you're having to overpay for these guys. So
are you going to take any stabs at TJ Hawkinson, or are you're out just because he's going to miss 2 or 3 seasons?
He's a hard fade for me right now. He's one of the guys, him, Chubb, like the old injured guys, and not even that. Like I don't think it's possible for them to come back and contribute late, but it's just you're gonna get a better price on them like 2 months from now. Like why take? I see Hawkinson. The Hawkinson ADP has shocked me like this whole draft season. It's been slowly kind of coming down, but like when the pre-draft stuff launched, like he would go ahead of like good tight ends. Like he was going ahead of like Njoku and stuff in drafts. I'm like Hawkinson, based on when his injury happened, might not play for the first 10 weeks of the season. So you're willing to eat like 10 zeros for a guy to come back and be the, probably the 3rd option on his team. Like, so I've taken like 0 Hawkinson because I probably will, like, if he moves, once it becomes apparent that he's starting the season on PUP or whatever, I think you're going to get a better price at him. So then it might make sense to like get a few shares as like your 3rd tight end who can obviously has upside and could give you a big playoff score. But like, that's a pretty thin needle to thread to hope that like he's going to play half the season probably at best, and that he's going to ramp up and give you a big score, and you're going to be able to eat those zeros from the position and advance the team. So I'm taking no Hawkinson right now, and I'm taking like little to no Chubb right now. I'll consider buying in later in August once we have a better price on them, what I assume would be a better price.
Oh man, it breaks my heart about Chubb. It's such a shitty way for a guy's career to potentially end. I think it's safe to say his high end elite years are probably behind him. I think Chubb's 30 now, and it's just like caramba.
You don't have that many like serious knee injuries and still have the same, like, it's just the difference in like that burst and explosiveness is just it's everything at that level, at the elite level. So it's like, is he ever going to be the running back that he was? Probably not. Like medical history would say no. We don't have a lot of examples of it. It's the same thing. I've heard a lot of smart people on Dobbins. I can't bring myself to click it just because it's like he's already had the multi-ligament knee injury, and now we have no example of a running back coming back from the torn Achilles to like really succeed. Like I think the best example is Deontay Foreman, who's like kind of like a back end of the rotation, like, RB3 on a team, like, and that's the best example we have of it. So if Dobbins comes back and beats me this year, like, hat tip, like, that's amazing, but I'm not going to like bet on something that historically has like never happened,
No, and even when he was healthy, he never really got to that potential that we thought he could be, right, when he was drafted a few years ago. So, yeah, I
No,
think
he
that's
never totally got there even before the injury. So yeah.
I'd say it's probably a safe fade. All right, man. Let's start talking about some of your player exposures because
All
I'm
right.
looking at them and they frankly they make me excited and there's a bit of a trend. Let's talk about your most rostered player, and that is Troy Franklin, rookie wide receiver of the Denver Broncos. You've got a 29% exposure rate to this guy, so obviously he's a relatively cheap cost. But what is it that you like about Troy Franklin so much that you're drafting him?
I just love the production. He was super productive in college. He's got the size. He's slight. He's like 170, but like in today's NFL, like you look at Smith, you look at Tank Dell, guys are getting by, but he's 6'2". He can bulk up a little bit, and obviously the landing spot, the chemistry
Yeah.
that he has. Like I want to say he had like 1,300 yards, and I know this isn't the Pac-12 or whatever they call it now, but he had like 1,300 yards and 14 TDs from Bo Nix. Like the chemistry is there. Like I could see him being the top target earner on the Broncos this year. I think Sean Payton is going to get the ball in his hands, and I think where you have to take him in like the 14th, 15th round, like because Denver's not a sexy team. Like no one is
Mhm.
like pining to draft Denver Broncos. So for me, like you're getting him in as a 14th, 15th round pick and a guy that could lead his team in targets and has explosive potential. I think he obviously fell to the fourth round, which is why he's falling in this draft. But I think he fell to the fourth round to a depth chart that he can rise quickly with his college quarterback who he has the built-in chemistry. And the reason he fell was because he had a bad combine. Like you can believe the story of like, oh, was he sick that day? Like that's what he was claiming. Like he had the flu and he just like
Mhm.
underperformed, which may or may not be true. But like to judge a guy who is that productive based on like, a couple days running around in shorts and a t-shirt and like I think you're getting a value there. And I think he could be, yeah, I think he could vastly outperform where he's being drafted. So he's a guy I do want a big exposure to.
Yeah, so a few things on that. So Troy Franklin, for anybody who's of course been listening to the show this whole off season, Brandon Adam loves Troy
Yeah.
Franklin.
We have a
So
lot of similar takes with Brandon
yeah,
Adams. We're
yeah.
in a dynasty league together, so it kind of scares me.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
gotta know.
So
I
what
gotta know where I gotta pick guys to get ahead of him.
we're in a rookie draft currently, and he actually just traded up for the 212 to go and get Jermaine Burton. But I want to say it
Yeah,
might have even been him, but Troy Franklin went mid round two, which is the highest I've seen him go in this draft. But the
yeah,
thirst is there. But yeah, so to your point, just a few just general narrative things here is that yes, he did have a poor combine. Um, the word on the street was that he had the flu, so take that for what it is. But really, it was a gauntlet drill, right? Like it's funny. You
yeah,
go back and you compare like a Chris Olave gauntlet, which was essentially poetry, right? Just so amazing
yeah.
to watch and just beautiful and fluid. And then you compare it to Troy Franklin, and it wasn't crisp. It didn't look good. But Denver Broncos didn't have a lot of draft picks. They traded up in the fourth round
Exactly.
to the 4.2 to go and draft this player. One of the things I like to see is that who are these players at the top of the next day? So be it round two, which would be the top of day two, or round four, which is the top of day three. And who are these players that may have fallen at that point and that teams want to make a move on? And obviously we saw Denver do that. And then to your point, they're pairing him up with his college quarterback, Bo Nix. Last year, this is per PFF, he had 81 receptions for 1,383 yards. His yards per catch was 17.1,
Yeah,
which is
it's
fantastic,
fantastic.
even for
Yep.
college. And he had 14 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And
It's
what
I
I really like is that he's got a diverse route tree, Chris, and he was successful at all levels of the routes. So he can do it all. It's a pretty thin depth chart. The team got rid of Jerry Judy. It's basically him. It's Cortland Sutton, and Cortland Sutton has his moments, but ultimately, like they could have room for a true alpha on that team. So I think Troy Franklin, absolutely love that take, especially for how cheap you can get him. Now, when you go and get Troy Franklin, are you pairing him up with the Bo Nix just in case they're actually good?
I'm taking a little bit of Bo Nix as like a QB3. It just kind of depends on how the draft breaks. I love Bo Nix in that Underdog just launched a Superflex puppy, a little like
Yes.
$5 tournament
Yeah.
that's a Superflex tournament, really fun. It's chaos because everybody, if you don't have
Mm,
3 quarterbacks by the end of round 6, you're just not going to get starters.
yeah.
But Bo Nix is like the last starting quarterback to go. Like, apparent starting quarterback. He hasn't been named it yet, but I assume
Yeah.
he's going to be the day one starter. I think he's a great value in that. And I don't have a problem if he's my third QB on a build where I'm waiting at QB. So, or I think I've even had a couple builds where I've had Lamar or somebody like that, and I've missed on like a couple of the mid round guys that I was targeting, and I wound up with just a Bo Nix Franklin stack as like my second QB piece. So like I'm fine. I think he's gonna be better than people realize this year too. Like I don't think he's gonna be any kind of like a fantasy like separator or anything, but I do think he will give you like competent play.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think that they overdrafted him in the draft this
Yeah,
year,
for
but
sure.
to your point, he probably is going to be a starting quarterback. And just for the people who haven't been following, it's Zach Wilson. Yes, the same Zach Wilson from the Jets, as well as Jarrett Stidham. So
Yeah,
it's not like it's a tough depth chart
no.
to climb. So yeah, no, I'm aboard with that. All right. Your second, and this was a teaser from before, your second most roster player is Ben Sinnott of the Washington Commanders. For now, Commanders, I guess. Which sounds
Yeah,
like
who
they may
knows?
be
But
looking at renaming their team again.
we're,
But
we're a fourth team name in like 6 years or something.
yeah,
But yeah, Sanat is is what everybody's kind of looking at to be like this year's Laporta, which I think is obviously unlikely. Laporta was the tight
yeah,
end one. But I do think Sanat is a really good athlete. I think he was underused in college and kind of had a good last season was, and I think he went to a place where he could succeed in Washington. Now
yeah.
it's funny, like he's got Zach Ertz in front of him, who I think me and you might be able to beat in a 40 at this point. And like anytime a good young tight end is behind Zach Ertz, everybody gets all scared and doesn't draft him. It happened with McBride, like, oh, he's got Ertz in front of him, and then Ertz is complete dust. Or it happened with Goddard. He's got Zach Ertz in front of him, and then Ertz is dust. Like, are we going to do this again? Like, Ertz might have a couple of decent weeks early in the season, but I think this is going to be Sanat's show. And he's kind of I got really heavy on Sanat early when you could get him in like the last couple of rounds. He's been steamed up now. So
Yeah,
now he's at a point where I think he goes right behind Luke Musgrave, who I really like too, being that Tucker Craft tore his pec and is going to be like out the entire preseason. He's hoping to be back for the season, but he'll be
yeah,
missing all the reps leading up to that. And I think that gives Musgrave a chance to establish himself as the tight end one there. But I do think Sanat has the talent to be a guy that will be like a really nice tight end too in your best ball build. So I'm definitely happy to have an overweight stance on him.
yeah. He's young. He's still only 21. He'll be 22 when the season starts, but still only 21. He was a second drafted tight end at pick 221 in the
Yeah.
draft, and he's just athletic. He's just a stud. So yeah, there's a lot of really smart people that are both in on him in dynasty, but also in best ball drafts. So I think that's fantastic. And then let's talk about your third highest drafted player, because this is one that I absolutely love, and this is a running back. So you've been pretty diverse, and that's Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. James Conner's getting old, man. He's been productive. He's one of these players where people have faded him, myself included, at our detriment over the years. He just seems to
Yep.
be timeless and seems to produce. But at some point, the wheels have to
The
fall
wheels are gonna
off
fall
James
off.
Conner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
There's a
tell me
lot
about
of
Trey
tread on
Benson.
those tires. I think Benson, like Connors always misses a few games,
Yeah.
regardless. Like even in his good years, like last year when he like outproduced and what most people originally thought he was going to do. Like I was fading him mostly last year. I just fade old running backs just basically on as a matter
Principal.
of principle. But I think when he misses a couple of games this year and people see how much more explosive Benson is, I don't think he's ever going to fully get that job back. I think Benson in that offense, I'm high on the Arizona offense in general this year. And I
Yeah.
think Benson's the kind of explosive big play back that you want in best ball that could put up like a monster week. Like I try to think of everything in the under the like the prism, the lens of can this guy put up a monster score for me in a playoff week to get me to advance? Like, I feel like I trust the structures and the rosters that I built to get me to like advance a high enough amount of teams to the playoffs. Like, can this guy put a score up that's going to help me advance and reach 15, 16, or 17? And I think Benson's got that kind of talent in this offense. And I think the chances of Connor being healthy that time of year, like, week 15, 16, 17 is a coin flip at best. So I love taking a chance on Trey Benson. What does he go, like the 9th round or something like that? There's not a lot of opportunity costs where you're taking. So I'm happy to grab him there.
He's dirt cheap. I mean, he was drafted at the top of round 3, which we love a day 2 pick in general. His best comparable, for those of you who are just learning about this player, is J.K. Dobbins. So that's the type of type that he is. He's quick. Yeah. He's got a 4.39 40-yard dash, but he's also thick, which we like to see. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is a player that he was, before the draft, I had him as my number 1 running back, just because to me he was more of the complete package, and Jonathan Brooks just worried me a little bit in terms of the injury coming into the season. Yep. So Trey Benson was my highest rostered player in best ball pre-draft. And so obviously the ADP's changed a little bit now that he's on that team, but to me it's an absolute smash where you have to pay for that player, and Arizona could be good this year, right? Like, they actually,
I think so.
Tyler stays healthy.
Yeah, I think they showed a lot last year. I think Kyler looked good. I thought Gannon was a better coach than I expected him to be. Like, I think that they got buy-in there. They kind of I think they're rowing in the right direction. I think Tyler came back and kind of seemed renewed within his focus. And now you give them Marvin Harrison, another year of McBride. I think Zay Jones will be kind of a useful wide receiver 3 there. Dortch has a role. Like, I think that's going to be a good offense. And if Connors happens to miss some games, I think Benson might take off. He might be that guy that we look at as has the potential to really be a league winner, like come like week 8 or something,
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So we're bumping up on an hour here, Chris, but I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there any other player that we haven't talked about on today's show that you just want people to know about, somebody that you're drafting quite often that we haven't already discussed?
This is like, everybody kind of has their like pet project player, like, and for me, as a Giant fan, it might sound a little homerish, but I'm still in on Jalen Hyatt. Like, he's going in the absolute last round. Like, he's the type of player that probably doesn't even get drafted in half the contest. But I think his rookie season was kind of a product of circumstance more than like a lack of talent from him. Like, that for the first few games while Jones was healthy, their offensive line was an absolute disaster. So Daniel Jones couldn't even get the ball down the field. And that's particularly what Jalen Hyatt does. Like, he was getting open. He was roasting his defenders, but there was just no opportunity and time to drop back and get him the ball. And now this year, the Giants have solidified their line to the point where it at least should be competent. And everything you read on Daniel Jones, every update has been that he is already doing 7-on-7 drills. He should be fine and good to go for week 1. And I think the attention that Neighbors is going to warrant from defenses is going to really open things up from Hyatt. And you don't need a big target share for a guy like this to get down the field and bust a long 1 or 2. And plus, I don't know what he's eating or on, but he came back looking like 15, 20 pounds of muscle heavier this season. Like, where the Giants like Twitter account was putting out pictures from OTAs. And I'm like, wait a second, I thought Waller was retired and not in camp. And it was Hyatt. Like, he looks yoked. This was a dude that was like, kind of like the Troy Franklin rookie coming in that everybody thought might be too skinny. And like, look up, you'd be shocked if you see a picture of Jalen Hyatt right now. He put on a lot of muscle, and I think if nothing else, it shows that he's taking the craft seriously. He's not out there like, just partying really wild. Like, he's putting in the work. And I think this is the type of dude that, like, in the last round of a draft, I've learned, I made this mistake my first few years playing best ball. I drafted guys that the kind of veteran guys that I knew would be out there and could get me like a 5 or 6 points each week and knew like we'll hit my lineup maybe once or twice a year and be like
Yeah.
a bye week filler. Like, I drafted a lot of Gio Bernard one year. I drafted, Hunter Renfro in the wrong years. Like, they're not going to break out. We don't necessarily know who the Puka is going to be that breaks out. There might never be another Puka again that breaks out like that as a 5th round rookie. But like, who's going to be the guy that breaks out and wins leagues for you? But I think we have a good idea who it's not. Like, guys like Tyler Boyd always gets picked on, but Tyler Boyd's not going to win you a league. Like, Tyler Boyd might like be a valuable fill-in one week or something, but he's not going to break out at this point. Like, I think Hyatt has the field stretching ability that he could be a bit of a breakout and could certainly pop off for like 1 or 2 big weeks that like hit your lineup. And if they come in the right spot, like he's free. He's at 18th round pick. He's a 20th round pick on DraftKings or in the Superflex contest. So he's my sneaky guy that I'm just still in on at like a fairly wide clip. I think I have like 25% of them right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I know Flex Matt, he was in on Jalen Hyatt last year. I really wasn't a big Jalen Hyatt guy. And maybe that's because I love Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale's just like the type of player that I just really gravitate to. I mean, he can do
Wan'Dale's very steady. He's going to be, a guy who I think I'm more of a Wan'Dale on DraftKings guy where you're getting the full point PPR. Like I think people kind of forget that underdog is only half point PPR. And I'm taking some Wan'Dale too, because I think he is a good player who they put the ball in his hands, but he'll rack up. He's more of a little like PPR darling, where I think in DraftKings Wan'Dale is a good pick. I get more of him than Hyatt in DraftKings.
All right, I need to grab some more Jalen Hyatt. I don't want to. I'm sold for the price. I think I'm actually just about to be in round 18 in one of my drafts when I slow draft. So I'll pull the trigger on Hyatt and just get a little.
And you know what? Another thing, he's the week 17 run back for your boy AR. They play Indy week 17. So that is it's a nice little sneaky run back. Those are the type of things that can tilt a week 17 game to your favor. If you're the only one who's, a lot of people aren't thinking that. Maybe it's insanity. Maybe it's just looking for micro edges, but a lot of people aren't worried about stacking AR with Jalen Hyatt in the 18th round. So that could be something for you there.
There you go. We're getting you all the tricks of the trade here at dfsarmy.com. All right, brother, that's it. We're going to wrap up the show. Fantastic job. You're going to be writing a few articles at the website over the summertime, or?
I'm definitely going to look to get a few more things up on the site as I come up with some more ideas of how I'm trying to crack this best ball egg and get over the top.
Fantastic, man. Well, I would say that we are almost officially transitioned away from the dynasty / rookie season now into the best ball season. That's most of the content that's out there. So we're going to start wrapping up our content. I'm hoping to get my rankings out within the next few weeks here so that people can just go and they can transplant our DFS Army rankings right into Underdog. And then that way you can see how it would compare to versus ADP. Of course, all of our content over at dfsarmy.com, dfsarmy.com. And hey, listen, for those of you who have stuck around and you really are interested in just the fantasy football space, we have a second YouTube channel that is strictly dedicated to the fantasy football game. So if you like DFS Army and you like fantasy football, make sure you go and search DFS Army Fantasy Football in YouTube, or of course, just make sure you're subscribed to the podcast feed. All of our episodes, no matter what, are going to be on the DFS Army podcast feed. So Chris, thank you so much for joining me, man. It was a lot of fun. We're definitely going to have to hit it up in like a month or two just to see how things are going. If any of your takes have changed, evolved since we were talking here, brother, but really appreciate you joining on the show.
Anytime, man. It was a blast.
Oh, and hey, if you guys want to follow Chris on X at Chris Felicetta, I am at the Flex Network 1. And of course, hit us up at DFS Army. So for Chris, I'm Flex Shane, and we are the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. Good luck in those best ball streets, brother.
Big time, knowing that, diamonds in my teeth.